all set up, I think. Thank you again to the CWWCA for inviting us and hosting us and being such good partners. We've got a few DWR updates for you this morning, talking about what's new this year, new rules, and some new guidelines, bulletins, exciting updates. A couple of administrative and personnel updates with DWR itself. I want to talk about some legislation, rulemaking, and policies. And we have e-forms updates for you. And then Chris will get into some licensing renewal and well construction rule updates. So in case you don't know us, we are the hydrogeology section of DWR. I supervise everybody. Andy Floor is our senior hydrogeologist, and Marcus Hatfield and Nolan Tanguma are our staff hydrogeologists. That's sort of one wing of our section. We have, and I should mention everybody's here today if you want to see them. We have a new well inspector in Division 1 and 2 primarily. His name is Don Fiore, and Don is here somewhere, hopefully maybe out in the lobby still. So Don will be covering most of Division 1, the northern portion of Division 2, and try to get over into Division 5 and 6 as he's able to. So welcome aboard, Don. He's hitting the ground running. We're really excited to have him on board. And then we have Chris Jones, our Chief Well Inspector, who is the work lead over our two field inspectors, Don and Larry Hakes, who's down in Division 3. Larry also tries to cover Divisions 4 and 7, and sometimes 2 as needed. And then a special shout out, she's not in our section, but Laura Califas is a great support staff for us. You are dealing with her right now with your licensing renewal, and she does an amazing job, works very late overtime, so props to Laura and for all of her help during meeting support as well.
Way to go, Laura.
Yay, Laura. Okay, the rest of DWR, we are in the same kind of branch under Sarah Brucker, Deputy State Engineer, as the water supply team. And this group, I would say, has been riding the retirement wave over the past couple of years. Almost everyone in a supervisory role here is new to it in a year or less. And just when we had stability and full hiring, Ioana is retiring at the end of this month, and we'll be hiring for her position. A lot of you probably deal with Ioana if you deal with Denver Basin permitting. So once we backfill that, we will hopefully be fully staffed again. But these teams are organized by the Water Division, in which they primarily issue permits. So if you ever have a permitting question, I will likely, if you call me, I'm just going to send you to this person. So right now, if you're inside Denver Basin designated basins, go to Ioana, Team 1A. If you're in Divisions 2, 3, 7, start with Elise Tyne. 4, 5, 6 is Wenley Dickinson, and then Kate Fuller is Division 1 outside of basins. So that would be up into Weld, Larimer County, those types of areas. So try to start with those team leaders if you have a permitting specific question. All right, wanted to touch briefly, I don't know if Dick Brown's here yet, but DNR is proposing to run some legislation in 2026, and it sort of affects you all, so I want to bring it up. But it's concerning the state regulation of all underground injection control wells, so UIC wells. The state will be seeking primacy to regulate and create a state-level program that regulates and oversees all underground injection control wells within the state. This is going to be hopefully introduced in a couple of weeks here, and it's sponsored by Representatives Pascal and Smith, and Minority Leader Simpson and Senator Hinrichsen. So we got a good bipartisan team, and hopefully this will move forward with the support of CWWCA. I want to go into what it means, really. Underground injection control. The EPA, as part of the Clean Water Act, regulates the construction and operation of 6 classes of injection wells throughout its UIC program. We are currently regulated by EPA Region 8. And the different classes have to deal with the type of fluid injected, the depth of injection, and how the depth of that injection is related to underground sources of drinking water. But the EPA has a process where states can apply for and obtain primacy or primary enforcement authority from the EPA for any wells in their state. So how might this work? Nationally, but more than half of all states have primacy for classes 1 through 5, which is all of the classes except for geologic sequestration wells for carbon dioxide. That one is a lot more rigorous, and not many states have that, except North Dakota, Wyoming, Louisiana, West Virginia, and Texas. They have full primacy for all 6 classes. Colorado has primacy for class 2, which are oil and gas related injection wells. And then they've applied for and expect to receive primacy for class 6 wells, those CO2 wells, in 2026. And those are both managed by the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Where do you all come in? You may be tasked with drilling and constructing class 5 wells. This is kind of the everything else. Class 1 is industrial waste. Class 3 is solution mining. Class 4 is shallow hazardous radioactive waste. Those are banned, so those don't happen anymore. And class 5 is everything else. Non-hazardous fluids and injection wells. This could be shallow recharge wells, municipal ASR wells, any well where you're introducing water underground, aquifer remediation as well.
So you guys are overseeing that now?
Next slide. The legislation is going to be set up like this. When you apply for primacy, you need to designate a lead agency. That would be ECMC, since they're already familiar with the EPA. They manage the primacy application. They manage any annual reporting requirements and grant program efforts from the federal government. Then there's these implementing agencies who actually have the regulatory authority over a portion of the UIC program, so one of the classes of wells. And they adopt associated rules and administrative procedures. And that would be ECMC for class 1, 4, and 5, and Division of Mining, Reclamation, and Safety for class 3, which is solution mining. It makes sense for the DRMS to have that. ECMC would have 1, 4, and 5 in addition to 2 and 6. And then DWR would come in as a consulting agency. We wouldn't have regulatory authority over the injection of the water through those wells.
Including ASR wells?
Right. We wouldn't have the authority about the injection, but we would still have the authority for the construction of the ASR wells. So what we imagine this being an advantage across all classes is that it's a tailored approach that considers all relevant state factors. It's not Washington, D.C. telling us what to do in our aquifers. It's a streamlined approach to permitting and regulating industries where state and federal authorities currently overlap. We sometimes have a tough time reaching people at the EPA, so it's much easier for us to go down the street to our DNR partners at ECMC or DRMS. We just like that improved interagency collaboration. And ECMC and DRMS are aiming to retain approval timelines or beat them and provide reliability and resource commitment and expectations amidst fluctuating federal priorities, shutdowns, et cetera. So we think the state agency being boots on the ground local is a great idea.
So for us to avoid EPA, we can just call you and say, hey, we got a question, you give the answer?
Right, so once we get the primacy, and that's 2-3 years down the road even, and ECMC rolls out rules, ECMC would be the permit or the authorization that you would get to inject water. EPA would not be involved at that point. So ECMC, so class 5, this is my ASR example might touch most of you. ECMC would be authorizing that injection. It would be determined through their rulemaking whether that's a permit, whether that's rule authorization or some other authorization. But their rulemaking would be focused on technical criteria and standards related to the injection wellbore, water quality geochemistry, with the overall goal of preventing contamination of underground sources of drinking water.
So is ECMC the ones that really made it so simple that it just didn't take any time at all now to deal with that, or?
That's their goal. Yeah, they've been frustrated with EPA, I think, and some other types of classes of wells. So if they got the primacy, if Colorado got the primacy, they would roll out regulations that were as protective as EPA, but they would be the local administrative agency and not have to rely on EPA to say, well, now you need a permit, now you need to show us this. It would just be ECMC's rules. And so ECMC would consult with DWR on any of these Class 5 style injection permits or authorizations. DWR is an expert on aquifer location and properties and associated water rights. And I just wanted to reaffirm that the Board of Examiners water well construction rules would remain in effect, in full effect. DWR's artificial recharge extraction rules that permit the pulling back out of that water that you just recharged into the aquifer would still apply for any artificially recharged water in non-tributary aquifers. There'd be a little more overlap too with aquifer remediation wells and oil and public safety, CDPHE, hazardous materials over there. But just wanted to quickly touch on that. Hopefully you'll hear from Dick Brown on that. We are hoping that the association might be supportive of the bill, and we'd appreciate any support we could get. I guess any quick questions on that before we move on? Okay, thank you. Wanted to talk about a couple of upcoming rulemakings. The well construction rulemaking is over finally since, I don't know, 2022 or something. But DWR has launched a new DWR-wide rulemaking webpage where you can see any active rulemakings or any departments that do not have active rulemakings. This covers any rules that are promulgated by the state engineer, the Board of Examiners, or the Colorado Groundwater Commission. So this is your one-stop shop for rulemaking, and I'll show you what it is.
Is this for the new rules or?
This is every rule that's currently in a rulemaking process will be up on this dashboard basically. And so this is what it looks like right now. Dam safety, data information, the grayed out, they don't have any active rulemakings. Anything with a green is something where a regulatory body is considering a rule under a new rule or rule revision. So right now, obviously, we are in the BOE administrative licensing rulemaking. We've started teasing the geothermal rules, but we're basically just gathering stakeholders for that at this time. But just wanted to remind you, rulemaking is a great page, and if you click Learn More, you go straight to the rulemaking widget on whatever web page it is. So this is really a good place to start. But also keep an eye on the latest news and upcoming events items on DWR's homepage. And as always, if you're on the BOE Info News subscriber list, you'll get any email updates from us too. Okay, upcoming BOE administration rules, the licensing rules. So some context, as of August 1st, 2025, ground heat exchangers, which are closed-loop geothermal systems, and ground heat exchanger contractors are added to Article 91, Title 37 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, which is the Board of Examiners water well construction statutes. The board has been renamed the Board of Examiners of Water Well and Ground Heat Exchanger Contractors. We added a sixth member, Terry Proffer, who just sat down here in the front. He was appointed this summer. He needs to have a minimum of 10 years of ground heat exchanger experience. I'm sure he has 20 to 30 I don't want to age you, but many, many years. A great expert. And what this means is that the BOE will have supervision and authority over the construction and abandonment of ground heat exchangers, and also the authority to license ground heat exchanger contractors. Currently, they operate under a permit issued by the Division of Water Resources. So that is a major topic we need to address in the licensing rulemaking, is to incorporate these contractors. And thank you again to CWWCA for inviting some of our geothermal contractors here today. They have, looks like a blue name tag in case you want to introduce yourself. I'm really hoping the industries can talk amongst each other and cross-pollinate a little bit. Part of this, as we incorporate them, we'll need to establish the licensing exams, much like you all take a license for your driller or pump installer license. We're looking at NGWA, IGSPA, Colorado rules. We need to outline the experience requirements needed to apply for a license. So that's ground heat exchangers. And then in general, all licenses, some major topics that we'll think about this afternoon from 4 to 5 p.m. are the current licensing rules adequate when we discuss outlining experience or continuing education or using education as a substitute for experience? What exams should we require? Financial responsibility for the compliance bonds. We upped it from $10,000 to $20,000 in 2018. Things are a lot more expensive in 2026 than they were in 2018. Is 20,000 still the right number? Is it 40,000? Is it 30? Can it be flexible based on your license type? These are all things we want to explore in the stakeholder process. We have the opportunity to talk about annual licensing and registration fees. They haven't changed since they started. The board does have the ability to amend those as needed, but it does also create some complications with our budgeting, of course. The topic of being directly employed by a licensed contractor or contracting with someone else to do work that should only be done under your contract or under your license. Are the rules adequate in describing what is allowed and what is not allowed there?
Are they?
We'll talk about it this afternoon. Got to hang on. And then, 4 o'clock, please come back right here. We're going to go through some of these major topics, shoot out some ideas we had, but really we want to hear from you, collect that feedback, and hopefully we'll have a second microphone for that. And then I teased the geothermal rulemaking. This will maybe start this year, hopefully. This deals more with the permitting fees and permitting procedures for shallow geothermal wells, both open loop and closed loop. We've discussed the potential for some type of operation or installation permit for ground heat exchangers. Not necessarily a full well permit, but maybe a notice of intent to install a ground heat exchanger at this location, at this depth. Involving this many boreholes. So maybe DWR and the board has an opportunity to review some of these if it seems like it could be a higher risk, if it's 1,000 feet deep in the Denver Basin and you're penetrating multiple aquifers, or you're in an area that has potential groundwater contamination. All things we want to explore in those rules as well. And definitely need to deal with open system reinjection well permitting. That would be a class 5 well that may eventually be regulated by ECMC rather than the EPA. We want to understand if we need better or at least updated construction and installation reports, lithology, kind of a borehole map for those where everything is on the property. If you want to participate in this one, sign up for in addition to the BOE Info News, sign up for the Shallow Geothermal Rulemaking listserv on our notification page, linked here. Real quick, want to touch on another potential rulemaking that may come up in 2026. This is the statewide non-tributary groundwater rules, which outline the permitting requirements for groundwater wells that utilize non-tributary groundwater. We're contemplating updated geophysical logging requirements, standardizing the header and the scale of these logs so that they're more usable by scientists and engineers. This is also in the new well construction rules, but we wanted in the non-trib rules that it's actually going to be the driller's responsibility to file geophysical logs and submit them if they were required by the permit. And we'll maybe touch on that in e-forms. Then there's also a good outline in the proposed rules that we started in 2020 where we outline timelines and procedures for DWR confirmation of aquifer and production intervals dealing with non-tributary wells where they are geophysically logging it in the middle of the night and say, hey, I got to change the aquifer interval or I need a sump and a rat hole. Basically lay out procedures. If you've given us notice ahead of time, we're going to be a lot more able and adaptable to help you out in the near term. if you just call us up at the last minute and we have no idea where you are, what you're talking about, we've built in ourselves a little more response time so we can come up to speed. And then there is another rulemaking listserv called Non-Tributary Groundwater Rules, if you want to sign up for that one as well. I believe that is all from me. Any questions on those?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what you mean by non-tributary? Like, where does that apply exactly?
Sure. Non-tributary groundwater, he asked, what is non-tributary groundwater? It's actually a legal definition. All groundwater in Colorado is considered tributary unless it's been proven non-tributary through a decree of the water court, a permit from the state engineer, or through a rulemaking procedure. The Denver Basin aquifers have been delineated to contain non-tributary groundwater within boundaries of a map. And then there's individual water court decrees that outline non-tributary groundwater, or sometimes they come to the state engineer and ask for a permit. It usually involves an expert report, water lawyers, a lot of back and forth. So outside of the outside of the Denver Basin, it's pretty much a case-by-case basis where you apply for a non-tributary well and it's evaluated. But it essentially is regulated and administered outside of the prior appropriation system like every other water right. So any groundwater well that's a non-exempt well depletes a stream and has to replace those depletions. Non-tributary groundwater wells do not need to replace. They don't deplete surface water, so they just pump the groundwater and use it for their uses.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to turn it over to Andy Floor to get into some of our recent guidelines, policies, and bulletins. Andy Floor.
Cool, thanks, Kevin. So we'll start off on this thrilling topic, but first, I wanted to kind of make the distinction between what's the difference between a policy, a guideline, a bulletin, because they all kind of sound the same. A policy basically is the replacement of a rule or the effectuation of a rule. So you can kind of think of those as the same thing. A guideline is more of like the board's direction of here's how we're going to treat this situation or this circumstance. Whereas a bulletin is more of like a public service announcement, hey, just so you know, this is something we think you should know about. So if you remember the well construction in the Cheyenne Basin or well construction in the Dakota Group aquifers, those were just public service announcements saying, hey, we've realized that this is some information that we should probably share with our community. So I'm going to try to fly through these because they're pretty dry, but I just wanted to kind of tell you what's been changed, some new policies that have gone into effect, and then some others that we've revoked. And this is all based on the implementation of the new 2026 well construction rules. So this first one, 2016-1A amended, we've touched this one a couple of times, but this is the policy that the board has given board staff direction on which way they want to take variances. So specifically this says the board wants to see variances that relate to these 10 or 12 topics. Otherwise, board staff can handle them if they would choose to. So we just made a couple of updates to this, put it on a new letterhead, updated the board title, made some new rule references, and then the board approved it December 2nd. We, like I'll say after all of these, we uploaded it to Laserfish, we distributed it out to the drillers, and then sent it out to the BOE notification list. So again, once we've made a change, we're trying to cast that net quite wide. This next policy is kind of establishing best practices for state boards and commissions. So this was started as a House bill, and really what it's turned into is our BOE training manual, the board training manual. So anything that's related that we think they should know about, we throw in here. So we added a couple of new references in here, again, made that board name change. And then we also included this policy history. So, hey, we've touched this is the third time we've touched it, this is what we did. So I just kind of threw that up there. Board approved that on December 2nd, and then we distributed it as best as we could. We have a new bulletin. This is concerning the construction of wells in the Upper Laramie Aquifer. This is a new target for some of that non-tributary water in Colorado. And so we, again, thought that we should let folks know that this is on our radar. You all should be aware of it. If you need any help with delineating the upper Laramie Aquifer, where does this exist? How deep can I drill? Let us know. There's a new inclusion in there of requesting a hydrogeologic aquifer review so that we can kind of help you out and give you some guidance. Again, then we distributed it as best as we could. Another new policy is related to continuing education. It used to be in the BOE administration rules that you could, I think, get 4 hours of online participation for your continuing education. In 2021, we pulled that out based on the pandemic and said, hey, we should probably allow maybe more than 4 hours of virtual. And so we decided to set that in policy each year. So this is a new policy related to that. It just says we're back to 4 hours in person and up to 4 hours of virtual participation, which is in line with what was originally in the rules. This other new policy is related to the use of bentonite grout in monitoring holes and monitoring wells. And this is kind of just an inadvertent mismatch of what wound up in the final rule set. We had some references that should have been in some references in Rule 14 that were pointing back to Rule 10, which is production well rules. And so the bentonite placement standards were more stringent than we originally had intended. So basically what it says is bentonite slurry grout is limited to saturated zones, granular bentonite is not limited to those saturated zones, and then the granular bentonite, the size of those grains or pellets can only be up to 1/4 of the annular space size. So anyway, just trying to formalize that into a policy because the rules didn't state it clearly or as intended. And I think Chris is going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, any questions about new or amended policies, guidelines, revision?
I'm sure we can read about it.
Yes, and also if you do have any questions on any of these, come grab me later or send me an email and we can discuss. All right, so I'm going to fly through these even faster. These are the revoke policies. Again, we tried to, at every rulemaking, we try to incorporate any of these outstanding policies and guidelines into rules where we can, because that's the most formal rule set we have, or the most formal information that we have. So as we wrap these into the rules, the policies could go away. So these are the ones that got revoked. Well construction standards for wells constructed into the unconfined San Luis Valley Aquifer. That's now incorporated into the aquifer definitions, which just says that those can be constructed as type 3. 2016-1, that we used to have the policy that said, hey, we're going to have this list of chemicals that can be used in well development and rehab. And now the rule 610.3 specifically says that same thing. So policy went away. 2017-2 was wells constructed into type 1 aquifers needed to isolate the type 3 aquifer. Again, that was kind of an inadvertent mismatch of the rules as the 2016 rule set went into effect. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically now in the 2026 rules, type 1 aquifers have to be grouted in plain case back up to the surface. This policy can go away because of that new rule, thereby requiring that same thing to isolate the type 3. Wells constructed in the southern high plains, those can be constructed as type 2 wells based on a definition in the designated basin rules. So again, we incorporated this into the aquifer definitions. So if you're going into the bedrock, you can construct those as type 2s. If you're only in the alluvium, those can be constructed as type 3s. And we'll revisit that in a second here. Well abandonments for type 1s. This basically just says that grout needs to be placed through the entire confining unit or 60 feet, whichever is greater. Again, that's wrapped into rules now, Rule 16.2.1. Okay, similar to the southern high plains and the northern high plains, if you're constructing a well through the alluvium, Ogallala, and White River, those can be constructed as type 2s. If you're only in the alluvium, that's type 3. Again, that's in the definition of aquifers. You all may remember this one. This is the Portland limestone cement kind of debacle from a few years ago, where it was really hard to get your hands on Portland cement. Our rules didn't allow that, so we put it into a policy. Now the new rules in 10.5 and in Table 2, we cite both, that you can use both Portland cement or Portland limestone cement. They're interchangeable.
You can use either one now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what the policy said, but now the rules say it too. And then again, grouting wells with driven surface casing, that's all spelled out in 10.4.2.1 now, and I know Chris is going to discuss that here in a little bit. Any questions on policies, guidelines, or bulletins? Awesome, let's move on. So we'll talk about a couple of new e-forms that we have. These ones we've been calling the generic e-forms. It's basically a better way, a more efficient way for us to ingest information that you all are giving us. And so the first one is for private driller assessments. So private drillers have been allowed in the rules, but we thought that it might be advantageous to make sure that they know our rule sets and know some things about permitting. And so this assessment is a really low hurdle, really. But it's just a way for us to make sure that they have the resources, the references that they need, that we think that they need at a minimum. And this will be a common theme, but as you go across these blue tabs on the top of the screen, you get to a new screen. But some of these hyperlinks in here are referencing out to our rules, the permitting webpage, just to kind of get them, hey, you need to know our rules. You need to have a permit to put in a new well, that type of stuff. And so it's a really limited e-form that says, hey, who are you? You realize that there's probably other state, federal, local guidelines that are regulations that you need to follow. Acknowledge that. And then we have a little quiz, if you will, the assessment portion. So there's 13 questions on this. It's not supposed to totally trip them up, but kind of establish that they have a baseline knowledge. One other thing I wanted to point out, this is the private driller exam. We think of pump installation a little bit differently. You're gonna have to take a different assessment for that. And then once they're done with that, they will also get it's not a license number because they're not getting licensed, but it is a reference number that would be unique to them. So similarly, this is the private pump installer assessment. Again, they go through kind of that same thing. Who are you? There's other regulations. Here's your assessment. At a minimum, we think you should be knowledgeable on these limited set of rules. All of them ideally, but let's start here. And also, drilling a well is different. We handle that differently. You might need to take the private driller assessment. Any questions on those? Yeah.
So on this private thing, is that a one well situation? But then you can't say, oh, I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna do it again.
For my neighbor. Yeah, right. So this is intended for a person to construct their own well on their own property for their own use using their equipment that they own. So this should be a real small subset of folks. And really that a lot of times where we see this come into play is gallery type wells that somebody's putting in on their own land for their own use. Most folks don't have their own drill rig if they're not a licensed contractor, but there are some, and so those are the folks that we're trying to catch here. And so one topic, or one thing related to that is when folks are applying for a well construction variance to put in this gallery well on their own land, we can also steer them towards this assessment and say, hey, before you do that, you're going to need to take this private driller assessment, and then as you're filing your paperwork, submit all of that too with your reference number. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the outcome when a homeowner installs their own pump and they didn't do it?
So, meaning that they said that they were gonna do it as a private pump installer?
They
And
do it. What happens if they're doing, the person does their own thing, doesn't fill out the form, and we get there 5 years later and the pump's in the hole? A lot of people put in their own pumps and you're not gonna fill out the form, so what happens to them?
At that point, I'd introduce myself to them.
send Chris to their house? Yeah, that would be unlicensed work at that point, and Chris would pursue them.
Yeah, they usually put in big drums.
All right, so this is another kind of simplified way for us to ingest information, an e-form for the well vault installation. Again, it's gathering minimal information. It just says, hey, what well are you talking about? What's your permit number? When did you do this work? What's the variance number that you're doing this work under? Because a well vault requires a well construction variance. And then it prompts you to upload an as-built drawing as well as photos of these things: the interior of the vault and the wellhead, the vault lid, drain to daylight. And then there's an opportunity for additional information, anything you want to let us know about this, or if they are not uploading an as-built diagram or something, an explanation of why. And then I'm submitting this as a licensed installer, as a private pump installer, whatever the case may be, and then we can ingest it and attach it to their permit file.
And that only involves vaults that the well is actually in, correct? Not additional vaults on a system or anything like that.
That's correct. This is just a wellhead vault. Yep. And then this last simplified form is the Rule 6.2.2.2 notification form. And so this is the scenario where someone calls you and says, hey, my pump stopped working. You try to go find the well permit, can't find it, can't locate it, it's not landing on the parcel, you've done your due diligence, maybe there is no permit associated with this. The rules actually require you to submit that information, notify us on a form that was built by the state engineer, and that's what this is. It just says, hey, someone was out of water, I couldn't find a permit associated with it, but I still needed to do my job. Let us know. This goes to our water supply team, and then they can kind of bird dog getting that well permitted, identifying the correct permit so that we can land this information with that permit file. But one thing to note is that if the work that you've done requires a pump installation report to be submitted to our office, you still need to go through that whole process. So this is really just hey, I went out and fixed a switch, put things back online, did some repair work to a well, but I don't know that it had a permit. That's what this form is for. And
Can't you just do that on the standard form that we fill out, if you replace the pump, you can't find a permit, so you just put no permit number. Can you do that on the normal form?
I believe that's
Yes,
correct.
Yes,
Yep.
that's correct. This form is only for the instance where you couldn't identify a permit, and you didn't do work that required you to submit that pump installation report. So if you messed with the pressure tank, changed the water line, you wouldn't have to submit a pump installation report for those type of repairs. We would ask that you submit this form instead.
Any questions on those simplified generic forms?
So simplified ones, you're gonna have like a cheat sheet with them all listed or something like that.
One last thing about this is we kind of left it as this obscure name, this Rule 6.2.2.2, because you all might know what that means, but we don't want homeowners trying to late register a well with this form. That's not what this is intended for. It's really just, I did work on this well and I'm not sure that there was a permit. All right, so we'll move on to well construction reports. our e-form is actually going live next Tuesday. We're done kicking the can. It's ready for prime time. It's actually up on our website. We'll make it available on Tuesday though. We're just kind of working out those last minute bugs. Pump installation report is coming next. We're hoping February. We'll see how well we get through the well construction report. Might have some bugs to work out. But we're there. We finally got there. Kevin can't put that in his presentations for next time, saying that we've kicked the can again. We're actually releasing these. And so I'll show you a couple of snapshots of the well construction e-form, but this isn't a full demo. We did more of a full demo in the mid-year last year. What I am going to try to focus on is this well construction report field form. This is a job aid for you, if you will, and the intent is to make sure that you have all the information that you'll need back in the office when you're filling out our e-form. We're asking a lot of questions, and so we just want to prompt you to have a response to each one of those things when you fill out the e-form back in the office. So I hope that'll make a little bit more sense as we step through this.
That's gonna already be online?
So
That last one?
the job aid,
Yeah.
it's not available yet. We're still working. We just found a bunch of typos in it yesterday. So it's something that we're framing up, introducing here, and we will make it available. One thing to note is it's built in a spreadsheet, and so it'll be customizable for you. I'll mention that again later, I hope. But the idea is that well, like I said, it just helps you answer all of those questions. And yeah. So without further ado, let's get there. So as you're filling out the well construction e-form, again, we'll go through the tabs across the top, and then kind of these rows along the left side. And so we're going to visit the geologic log, the borehole and drilling method, casing, and annular space. And so first, the geologic log. I wanted to show you a pro tip. When you get in there, there's this hide button up on the top left. You can hide that and get a little more real estate for this geologic log so you can see more of those fields. But the idea is that you'll go in and you'll add a new record for each one of these rows. So for each interval that you're trying to describe, 0 to 10 feet was this, 10 to 40 feet was this, 40 to 45 feet was this. And we'll come in and we'll answer, are you going down the unconsolidated material path, or are you going down the bedrock path? Okay, what type of material was it? You said it was unconsolidated, we'll give you the unconsolidated materials list. It was bedrock, great, we'll give you the bedrock list. What color was it? Was it water bearing? All of those things. So these are all built into the e-form already. We just wanted to try to match this field guide that you can actually print out and have with you on the rig. And so I'll kind of step through each one of these. So we'll zoom in, and like I said, well, first off, anything that has this red asterisk next to it is going to be required information. If it doesn't have that red asterisk, then it's voluntary. So again, for each interval, from 0 to 10 feet, it was unconsolidated, it was topsoil, 10 to 40, it was nowhere to bedrock, it was sandstone. So you can check each one of these boxes, and so when you're going back to fill in the e-form, it's much more straightforward.
Jimmy, will this be also for closed loop ground heat exchangers?
I believe so.
Eventually,
Hope so.
yeah.
I would like to see it.
Once it's created, yep.
And again, for each one of those intervals, we'll identify a color, whether it was water bearing, the hardness. If you want to supply the aquifer or formation name, if there's any other comments for that interval, you can provide those too. So also, if we back up to the mid-year, Tom Hanna was there and he was explaining basically the Johnson Field Guide. And that's what this was designed all around. The e-form is actually designed all around that. And so this should look familiar to you. So we go down to that next group of information, borehole and drilling method. Again, you'll add a record for each one of those intervals. Hey, I drilled from here to here using this drilling method. If you want, with this borehole diameter. I use this type of drill bit, and then the next, and then the next. So you just kind of keep adding new records. Well, same thing. This is what our field guide is supposed to emulate as well. So from 0 to 40, I use air rotary, a borehole of this size. So you can fill that out as you go. So our next group of information is related to casing. Again, same thing. Add a new record. From 0 to 39 feet, I had solid steel casing of this diameter, this wall thickness. So our field guide matches that. And the annular space, this one gets a little more complicated, and really it's because there's a lot of different selections. So there's a lot of different types of material that can be in that annular space, and also the related density information that we would be looking for related to that. So again, based on intervals, where are you placing this material? But if you're going with high solid bentonite grout, we have two pieces of information that we're looking for density. If you're using cement, fly ash, bentonite, well, we've got 5 different pieces of information that we're going to be looking for density. So the options really expand, which is why this looks so crazy. But really, and we'll zoom in again. But really, if you're using neat cement, great. How much of it do you use? How much water? You know, for cement, bentonite, fly ash, cool. Fill out the rest of this information. How much material did you use? How much water? What percent fly ash? What percent bentonite? Who made it? So again, if you don't ever use cement, bentonite, fly ash, you can delete that information out of your spreadsheet and just give you the options that you use. If you're only ever using neat cement and filter pack, easy. So this is just kind of moving on down with different selections. If you've got filter pack, clean sand, clean gravel, great. If you're using silly beads, there's this other column. How did you place it? Was it through a tremie? Did you pump it? Did you pour it? And then again, how much and what units are you using? I'm going to regret saying this. Any questions? So again, the E-form is already built. It's going to ask you all this stuff. What we're trying to show you is this field guide that you can fill out on the fly, so you're prompted for all the information that we're looking for. It's hopefully going to be a job aid, something that helps make life easier. And since it's a spreadsheet, we can adjust it, you can adjust it.
So if you just print that out, how wide is that?
So I did print it out for the technical working group last night. The first 3, so lithology, casing, and borehole, those are single pages, just 8.5 by 11. And then I think we did annular materials, 2 pages.
So you can eliminate things you don't deal with.
Exactly.
Basically, hide it.
Yep. And so each one of those would just be a new piece of paper. Yep.
Can be done in the field.
Yep, exactly.
Are we gonna be required to do the E-forms? How's that phase-in period look?
Excellent question.
What's that gonna be?
Yeah, so we're in that weird in-between time, right? Where the new rules are in effect. So if you drill a new well, you're under the 2026 rules. You can use the E-form as it goes live. We'll also be accepting the PDF, the printed version, through March is our timeline right now. However, you still might be reporting on wells that you constructed in 2025, right? You've got 60 days?
Then we can pick, right?
Yeah. So, for now, yeah. The one caveat to that is that if you construct a well in 2026 and are using the PDF and filling it out on our own paper form, that's fine, but the new rules require information related to well development and cleaning. And so you'll have to fill out, again, this is a simple form, but it's the GWS 31A, and it's just so that we can catch that last bit of information. So that's the one difference. So if you're going to use the E-form, you constructed a well in 2025 or 2026, that's fine. It'll prompt you for all that information. If you constructed a well in 2026, but you still want to use that PDF, you'll also have to fill out this GWS 31A. Is that clear?
Can we fill this out and then go in and edit before we do this final submittal? Or once you like click through, are you done and locked and it's a pain in the ass to try to figure it out from there?
So on each of these e-forms, you'll have a dashboard, and so you'll be able to create an entry for any report that you're trying to submit. You can go in and monkey with that as much as you want, and then it's not until you click submit that it'll send it off to us. So if you want to get, you know, the bare bones in there, so you remember exactly which well this was, that's great, and then come back to it a week later once everything's finished up and
So
you've
you can
developed.
save it right there.
Exactly, you can save it in your dashboard. What's that?
You can change anything but the permit.
Oh yeah, so one big caveat, again, in I think every one of these forms, is that you really want to make sure that that permit number that you're referencing is correct on the front end. If you have to change the permit number, it starts you back over. So it'll wipe out all that information. There is a way that we might be able to help recover whatever you have filled out. If you do need to, if you're like, I filled this out for the neighboring well that I did next door, we can probably help you recover some of that. But just make sure that you know exactly which well you're trying to reference on the front end.
Are these forms going to be downloadable so that you can download them and fill them out in the field when you're out of service, or is this something everybody's going to have to do in their office?
No. So the question was, can you print this out so you can fill it out? No. You'll have to do this in front of a computer with internet access. Sorry.
Not print it out. Download it.
Download
fill
the
it
form.
out and then re-upload it.
That's
Is
what
that
the field guide's for.
Right. No, you won't be able to do that either. There's no offline version of this that you can just have stored on a tablet or something. It's linked to our eForm system, so it has to be live. But that's exactly where this field form is supposed to help out, capturing all of that information that you're trying to capture.
Goal for 2.0 though, so it's to have the offline version.
That would be great because most of these guys are out in the field.
Right.
It's
And
not always easy to get when people are away from their office.
yep. And we understand the doing it twice. That's not less than ideal.
Are there required fields before submittal will be accepted on it? Meaning, will it just not submit, and flag it?
Yes. It basically won't let you advance past. Let's see what
You have a red star.
That's right. So, good example of that. Yeah, you're trying to fill out lithology. It's not going to let you go to the borehole until you've filled out a piece of information for each one of these. And you can have your own dummy numbers or something, 0 to 999, and just everything's topsoil or whatever to get through to those next fields if you'd like. But yeah, it's not gonna let you advance past this screen until you've filled something out in those required fields.
Okay, now, once you've done this, and you're all finished and we submit it, and everything's fine, can we print out that copy of that and put in our files and also for our customers?
Yeah, so the question is, once it's done and submitted, is there a form that you can print out and have for yourself, for your customers? Yes, there is.
That's a PDF.
Yes, it'll be, once it's ingested, it kind of creates a new report, and that will be a PDF like you're used to, just several more pages.
So a follow-up to that is there gonna be an email from Water Resources saying that permit was submitted as a confirmation?
So the question is, will there be confirmation that you have successfully submitted your report? And I believe there will be, yeah.
Confirmation email to the submitter, and then once it's intaken by records, not approved, but ingested into our system, it should be the well owner and the submitter should get an email at that point.
Perfect.
From you guys.
From the Yeah, the automated system, it's
Yeah.
record set, intake it, put it into Hydrobase, well owner, submitter, get an email. With a direct link to the download. Probably even attachment.
Would consultants be receiving that as well, or just owners?
I need to talk to records. If the consultant is the one submitting it, they would be. It's, as far as I know, I hope it's the well owner and the submitter. There is an option to CC additional people. If you want to put in additional details, also CC this person. Records will hopefully see that and can do that on the email, outbound email.
Everybody catch that? But whether consultants would be, or agents or extra people, could they be added to it? Could it not just be the submitter and the owner? And we're working on it, is basically the answer. But yeah, you should be able to write in, hey, also send it to this person and this person. Yep.
Do we have another microphone that we can maybe reach the people asking the questions?
We do. We'll bring that up.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're trying to repeat, but that's less than ideal. All right. In the interest of time, we'll move on to Chris Jones.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, thank you. All right, Chris Jones, Chief Well Inspector. Want to start with a few updates for the 2025 year-to-date well permit count. This also includes some information about well construction, pump installations, wells plugged and abandoned. Year-to-date, permits issued, about 6,300. So on a year-to-year basis, kind of down there at the bottom, this is looking like, not our best year, not our worst year, kind of a middle-of-the-road type year. Geothermal use permits, 179% of the previous year, so a lot of geothermal work going on out there. We anticipate that trend is likely going to continue, but with the changes in incentives from the government, we don't really know. That's up in the air a bit. Wells constructed in 2025, about 2,700. Again, these numbers are live. They're going to continue to update over time. We don't know a well's been constructed until the contractor submits a form, and you've got 60 days. It hasn't been 60 days since the end of 2025, plus any accommodations for late reports. So we're anticipating these numbers are going to change as we continue to get those work reports from 2025. Pumps installed, again, about 2,900. We're anticipating that number is going to go up as we continue to get reports. And wells plugged and abandoned in 2025, about 1,150. Any questions on these numbers? Here none, moving on to the well inspection count. This is a breakdown of the well inspections performed by the well inspection program, so the 2 field inspectors plus myself, by month through the divisions. Again, these are concentrated in divisions 1 and 3 because that's where the well inspectors and the field inspectors are located. Division 2 is kind of split between Don Fury and Larry Hakes. But divisions 4, 5, 6, 7 are visited less frequently on an as-needed basis, as we get complaints or as we see high-risk wells pop up out there that we can get to. From the middle of June to the middle of September, we were without a well inspector for the Division 1 area. Shaylee Andrietta left the Division Water Resources, and Don came in September. So that's that gap that we see in Division 1 through this period. Generally, the total number of well inspections performed in any given year ranges from about 900 to 1,100. This year, we're a little bit below 900 because of that missing well inspector in Division 1 for a period of time. Any questions about the distribution or the inspections? Hearing none, moving on. So those of you who were at the CWWCA mid-year meeting, you're going to see some repeated slides here. But I think review is a good thing, especially since we're dealing with a new version of the rules that were adopted by the board. So again,
I wanted to say thank you to the stakeholders and the Board of Examiners for your efforts in evaluating the potential rules, your efforts in making your opinions heard, and those efforts to get a new version of the rules passed. They did go into effect January 1st, 2026, so all wells being constructed and completed in 2026 are under the now adopted rules, the 2026 version of the rules. Hope everyone knows where to find those. Those are posted on the Division of Water Resources Well Inspection website. I hope you all have had a chance to review those at least once. We're going to hit some of the main topics of the changed rules, those that were adopted. We're going to go through a couple aquifer names, dry holes, wells, pumps, wells located relative to vessels containing contaminants, centralizers, driven casing grout, annular space, type 1 grouting, confined San Luis Valley aquifer, type 1 abandonments, confined San Luis Valley aquifer abandonments, and some monitoring holes and wells. And I'll try to fit as much of those topics or as many of those topics in as I can during the period here. If you could give me like a 5-minute warning.
We've got a half hour right now.
Half hour.
We touched on a few of them too, so.
Yeah.
Cruise through the couple.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. If I don't talk about one of the rules that you're interested in, please come find me. I'll be here all day. We can talk one-on-one or in small groups with respect to wells, rules, pumps, the changes that may be most important to you. We had a lot of definition changes. Mainly these were to kind of clarify the terminology that we're using in Colorado in our water well construction pump installation industry. Other wells generally, or other terms generally used throughout the industry are accepted by the rules themselves. But specifically, we have these terms, type 1, type 2, type 3 aquifers. Now we've got a few more that we've squeezed in there. But type 1 rule was amended to kind of do away with the concept of type 1 single confining layer, type 1 multiple confining layer. Now those concepts, those realities still exist. You may drill a well and it's going to penetrate one confining layer or multiple confining layers. But the definition, the rules were changed such that there's a single construction rule for type 1 aquifers. We're no longer separating type 1 single from type 1 multiple. They're all being constructed the same. Some other aquifer types, we've thrown these names out in guidelines, policies, but the High Plains aquifer is generally on the eastern side of Colorado. It means the Ogallala and White River aquifers. The High Plains aquifer is a type 2 aquifer, so it doesn't have its own construction rule. The rules reference that if you're constructing a well into the High Plains, look to a type 2, except for those cases where you're only constructing it into the overlying alluvium, then it can be constructed like a type 3. So the southern High Plains aquifer is again within the High Plains aquifer, but just on the southern side of Colorado. It includes the alluvial, Ogallala, Dakota, Cheyenne, Docum aquifers. Wells constructed with those, again, you can construct a well through all those aquifers, construct it like a type 2, but again, if you're limiting yourself only to the alluvium, you can construct it like a type 3 aquifer. The confined and unconfined San Luis Valley aquifers. So if you work in Division 3, you're likely familiar with these. The unconfined San Luis Valley aquifer, so the materials to the top of the first confining layer within the confined San Luis Valley aquifer, is a type 3. Division 3, their engineers have developed the clay and RGDSS model to identify the depth to layer 2. Those depths are generally indicated on the permit. So if you're constructing it in a type 3, you're going to have some sort of limitation on that permit saying the well cannot be deeper than such a number that the division engineers generate. If you're going to construct it in the confined San Luis Valley aquifer, that number given by the state engineers down there is going to give you an idea of where they're anticipating the top of that confined clay layer is. Now there has been some talk down there that they're going to start delineating layers within that, so not only the top of layer 2, but layer 3, 4, 5, 6 as different layers within the confined San Luis Valley aquifer. But the number that they give you there is, with respect to the top of the confined San Luis Valley aquifer, is incorporated into how the board generated a rule to make sure that the unconfined is isolated by casing and grout from the unconfined. So not only do you have to look at that permit condition, but our rules require you to extend at least 10 feet below the top of the confined San Luis Valley down there. Dry holes. Definition has been incorporated in the rules to suggest that a dry hole means a borehole that does not produce enough water for the permitted use. So it doesn't have to be literally bone dry. It can be a very low producer that isn't going to support the intended uses of that permit. You can submit a well construction report for the dry hole, indicate on that dry hole report that you intend to continue to drill under that same permit. But now we would be able to collect that information from that dry hole. It's available to other contractors, available to the Division of Water Resources. It's good information to have. Rule 6222, this was discussed in detail. I'm just going to skip over this slide. Well location. So we went to great lengths and the board agreed that it was necessary to clarify the offsets to different objects within the ground, on the ground, those offsets between the well itself and a vessel containing contaminants, to include those that are on the ground surface. So it's not just those buried septic tanks anymore. If there is a above ground fuel tank, again, we made some exclusions within the rules for those fuel tanks associated with those that are on the drilling equipment. That's not the intent to regulate those. It's those above grade vessels with contaminants, below grade vessels with contaminants that are within 50 feet of the well itself. There was some additional work to clarify what is appropriate well casing material. The big takeaway was that corrugated metal, really the culvert pipe, that's been a favorite of many individuals to use for the construction of gallery wells. That has been written out of the rules. So the rules specifically state corrugated metal casing must not be used in well construction. There's also been some changes with respect to the PVC casing type. So PVC well casing, the previous rules primarily focused on Schedule 40 type pipe, but referenced ASTM F480. We're continuing that reference, but there's a lot more than Schedule 40 in ASTM F480. There's Schedule 80, Schedule 120, and then all the SDR rated casing pipes. So the rules were modified to acknowledge the use of those other casings, not just Schedule 40, provided that the casing strength is not less than the equivalent Schedule 40 casing pipe. And that all casing must be selected to have the appropriate strength for the intended use. So I encourage you, if you're interested in using some of those other than Schedule 40, reach out to your pipe supplier. They're going to have tables such as this that would show what the wall thickness versus rated strength. So you can compare what the wall thickness might be for a Schedule 40 pipe, and then make sure you're selecting the appropriate pipe so that the strength would not be less than that equivalent Schedule 40 pipe. And then again, for that, the aspect of the rules require you to select the appropriate strength of the intended use. With the adoption of the change Type 1 rules, the requirement for steel casing for Type 1 multiples has been removed. We just say, select the casing appropriate for that material. You'll be potentially faced with a situation where you need to decide how much neat cement grout you can place against that PVC casing, should you choose to use that. I again recommend you reach out to your casing manufacturer. They can give you good guidance on what they consider the strength of their casing, how to evaluate how much pressure you can put on the outside of that casing, potential ways to put materials on the inside. If you put water on the inside of your casing, is going to be able to support more than if it was void or empty on the inside of your casing when you're putting grout on the outside. So they're going to have some guidance to help you understand, what is the appropriate use for the casing type that you've selected. Centralizers. There was a lot of grievance with respect to what type of centralizer, what spacing, what the intended purpose of the centralizer was, how many planes should the centralizer be sticking out from the casing. I think we've beaten that one quite a bit, and there is a lot of guidance, but I think it's going to still take, if the well inspector comes up to you, has some questions about what you're using. Is it appropriate for the depth? Is it appropriate for the casing? Does it have enough planes? Those are still going to be on-site discussions that you're having with the well inspector. But we would encourage you to read those rules. We tried to give plenty of guidance to indicate that there are requirements in any grouted interval to properly centralize the casing. Those centralizers can be metal or plastic, pre-manufactured or contractor generated, provided that the contractor generated pieces of metal that you're attaching to your casing, or plastic, if you're generating your own plastic ones, that they're big enough, intended for the purpose, and they're actually going to serve the purpose they're there for. Again, reminders that wells constructed with surface casing, or if you're just doing a single string, you're putting your grout against the production casing, the centralizer is required in any required grouted interval. No more than 50 feet on center. And if you're grouting a single string, production casing in that term, that production casing has to be hung in tension during the placement of grout. Driven surface casing. The previous rules required that any time driven surface casing was installed, you had to grout below the base and above the top of the base of that driven casing. Many contractors have been adopting a construction method that was originally incorporated through policy, but now that policy has been revoked. It is in the adopted version of the rules that if you drive casing, but first drill an open hole, and then you drive that casing through the bottom, provided that open hole interval allows you to grout the required interval, minimum angular spaces, minimum thickness of grout, appropriate for a type 3 or a type 2, but then you choose to drive down below that. If you have achieved the minimum open annulus grouting intervals, but still choose to drive casing, you do not have to grout at the base of the driven casing, provided that you've otherwise accomplished all the appropriate grouted intervals for that material. So that was not previously in the rules, but it is acknowledged now as a construction method that is acceptable. So here's an example. Let's say that you have drilled an open hole through the type 3 material. You've met the minimum thickness or the minimum depth for grouting through that type 3. There's some type 2 in there. Oh, this is really a type 2 well. So if you can open hole down to at least 39 feet, but you drove to say 50 feet, well, if you can open hole and place grout on the outside of that driven casing for the upper at least 39 feet, you're completely isolating the type 3 from the type 2. You're not required to grout down below the base of that type 2 if you've otherwise accomplished the open hole annular space grouting rules. In the cases where you're not, you still have the requirement to grout for type 2s, type 1s, Laramie Fox Hills, confined San Luis Valleys, minimum 20 feet below the bottom of your driven casing, 10 feet above. If it's a type 3, it's just 10 feet below, 10 feet above the base of your driven casing. Let's say that you drive your casing and you have a real thick layer of type 3 material. You didn't drive it quite all the way through that type 3. You're still required to fully isolate the type 3 from the type 2. So, ideally your grouted interval below your driven steel casing still has to accomplish not only the 20 feet below, to satisfy the type 2 driven casing rules. But that grout would also have to extend down to the top of the bedrock to fully isolate the alluvium from the type 2 materials down below. Driven casing should not be used to penetrate confining layers. The small annulus that may be remaining outside your driven casing would not be adequately sealed. Let's say that you drive, in this case on the option 4 on the right, you've driven through multiple confining layers in that case. If you're only required to grout at the base of driven casing, there may be the opportunity for water to migrate along that driven casing through the confining layer. These new rules indicate that you cannot penetrate more than 20 feet below the transition from one aquifer to another, whether that be from a type 3 to a type 2 or through confining layers into a type 1, just to establish a seal relatively near the top of that transition. Annular space. So type 2s and 3s, you're generally operating under the same rules as you were previously. So the borehole must not be less than 2 inches larger than the outside diameter of the casing. Whenever you're grouting between 2 strings of casing, you also have to have at least an inch of annular space in the type 2s and 3s. If grout is placed for type 1s or Laramie Fox Hills via positive displacement, so think Halliburton method, through the casing, then pumped up from the bottom of the casing through the annulus, you may also continue to use the current, or well, it's definitely current, but what you had previously anticipated was the 1 inch annular space rules. It comes into those situations where you're not grouting those type 1s or Laramie Fox Hills with positive displacement Halliburton method type grouting. If you are grouting outside of the annulus via tremie, that annular space needs to be at least 3 inches. Well, the borehole needs to be 3 inches larger than your casing. The annular space is 1.5 inches all the way around. For type 1s, an additional option of grout, instead of using a cementitious grout, bentonite grout may be used. Granular bentonite grout specific, so pellets, granules, or chips, to be placed prior to full hydration. Those must be placed by tremie at the point of placement. The tremie has to be, well, the ID of the tremie needs to be at least 4 times the nominal size of the chip, pellet, or granule. So you have to consider how big the pellet is. The ID has to be 4 times that. The OD of your tremie cannot be larger than the annulus. The annulus has to be at least 1.5 inches. But if, let's say, you're placing 3/8 inch chip, you're pushing more than likely what a 1.5 inch annulus is required. So if you're doing a 1/4 inch chip, then well, the inside diameter is 1 inch. Maybe you can get a piece of 1.5 inch OD tremie, metal tremie down there. Maybe you can get right at 1.5 inches. But in many cases, the annular space is going to be dependent on what size tremie you're using to get that material down there. So type 1, again, type 1 does not include a Laramie Fox Hills, that's a separate rule, or a confined San Luis Valley, although a Laramie Fox Hill and confined San Luis Valley are likely going to be a confined aquifer. The type 1 rules are specifically for the aquifers that are not those two, because those two have their own requirements for construction. So for a type 1, casing requirements, solid casing is required above the production zone. You have to maintain that minimum requirement for steel casing near the surface for a type 1. But the solid casing, is up to you now. For type 1s previously, it was PVC. Type 1 multiple previously, it required steel casing. This is going to be allowing solid casing, but your choice, based on how much grout you think you can place against the length of casing you need to completely isolate the production zone below the confining layers. In many cases, we're anticipating steel is still going to be needed, but there may be opportunities to use more PVC in some of these type 1 multiple wells that were previously only allowed to use steel casing above the production zone. So here is one of the figures from the new rules. Again, it's showing solid casing above the production zone, whether it's a single confined or multiple confined. Grout is starting at the top of your production zone and extending up to the minimum requirements of Rule 10521. So that's either going to be within 3 feet of the ground surface if no pitless adapter is installed, within 3 feet of the pitless adapter, or 10 feet below or 10 feet above the base of your grouted surface casing if you use that. Again, just calling out that the grout must be placed at the base of the confining layer overlying, or confining unit in reality, I think that's the word that we're using now, above the production zone. In the Denver Basin, those intervals for the confining layers, for the aquifers really, are indicated on the permit itself. For those of you working outside the Denver Basin, if you are unfamiliar with the geology in the area, you're uncertain what aquifers or confining units you may encounter, you are required to become familiar with the geology in the area. Kevin and Andy have had a lot of presentations where they've introduced the Colorado Groundwater Atlas geologic maps. We encourage you to take a look at those and reach out and become familiar with the geology. But if you're still uncertain, reach out to Andy and his Hydrogeo group. They are an excellent reference, and they would be happy to walk you through what you might encounter there, what you might be expecting, to help identify where that confining layer might be. So the granular bentonite, should you choose to use granular bentonite in the type 1 construction, it's limited to that interval below the minimum 39 feet of like the shallow seal that you might consider. So granular bentonite should not be used up to the ground surface. Really near the ground surface, we're more concerned with the desiccation. So in no case should bentonite be brought to shallower than 39 feet in a required grounded interval. Confined San Luis Valley, again, the Division 3 engineers are going to confirm or give some guidance on the permit where that the top of the confined unit is. Solid casing and grout is going to be required to be placed above the top of the confined layer 2. Kind of touched on a lot of these, but really the rules intend to clarify how to completely isolate the unconfined aquifer from the confined aquifer. It's no longer acceptable just to place grout to the top of the confined layer. As indicated on previous permits, they would say the steel casing and grout or solid casing and grout must be placed to a certain number on those Division 3 permits. This is asking you to at least go 10 feet below the top of the confining clay series.
5 minutes.
Thank you. In many places, the top of the confined is shallower than 30 feet. And there is some confusion down there on, do you just place solid casing and grout to the top of the confined series? The rules adopted by the board, treat it more like any other bedrock well, where there is going to be a minimum depth of solid casing and grout. So even if the top of the confined starts at 10, 12 feet, you're still required to place a minimum 30 foot of continuous grout, 39 feet of steel casing. And this figure within the rules kind of demonstrates some of those different conditions you might encounter for a confined San Luis Valley well. Type 1 well abandonment, it's going to be very similar to what you're used to. The rules were modified to make it more clear that you do need to evaluate how the well was constructed, when it was constructed, and did it meet the rules at the time it was constructed. We think it's more fair to evaluate, the wells in that method, and that's the way that these rules were written. So let's say a well was constructed in 1975. Well, at that time, they were only required to put 10 feet plug of grout at a confining layer. So you'll need to understand, what the rules were at the time, how it was constructed, to evaluate where the confining layer is, and how much grout is required inside the casing, and if there's requirements to perforate casing to get grout on the outside, if there's an incident where grout was not originally placed outside that casing. So it is going to take some likely interactions with the hydrogeo group if you're trying to figure out where are the confining layers for the type 1. In instances where there's evidence that the well construction did not comply with the rules, so there is no grout placed at a confining layer, well then we're looking at ripping perforations or removal of casing through the entire confining layer with a minimum 60-foot grout plug, or grouting through the entire layer, whichever one's more. So we look forward to working with you on evaluating how those type 1's wells were constructed, and we'd be happy to give you guidance on abandonment procedures for those type 1's. I know we're getting close to the end here, but monitoring holes in wells, Andy did indicate the board just recently issued policy 2025-3 to kind of correct or point individuals constructing monitoring holes in wells. That may be more of the crowd that deals with environmental or geotech side of things, but we know that some of you in here will also venture into the monitoring hole in well side of things. The intent was to establish a minimum annulus for the construction of these wells that previously did not exist in our rules. Also to establish a minimum interval where a cementitious grout was required near the surface. These rules have accomplished that. And also to make it clear to contractors or consultants constructing these wells that the intent is to place grout, limit the interval that you're actually monitoring to the filtered interval, and then have a grout, whether that be a bentonite seal or a cementitious grout seal, above the monitored interval, and to keep a monitored interval to a single aquifer at a time. We did revise the construction figures. It's no longer acceptable to construct it generally in accordance with these figures. Now there's specific rules that require minimum annuluses, material types, intervals of specific materials. So those have become clear, and we're hoping that is a step forward in the right direction to bring compliance within the monitoring well construction community to a more reasonable way to construct these. That is the end of the slides. I know I didn't leave very much time for questions, but I'm open for questions as we have time now, and please find me during the day to ask any other questions.
I just wanted a quick question about the dry holes. Is it going to be on that same online recording?
Yes, that's correct. So to report a dry hole, it's going to be still on the well construction report. You'll see like a radio button or a tab to press to indicate to us that it is a dry hole.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a minimum gallons for contamination? So for instance, if somebody puts a 50-gallon drum of diesel, that situation, is there a minimum, like for fuel?
There's no minimum, so it's a vessel containing contaminants. Does that mean if someone puts a cleaning product next to the well? I think reasonably we'd probably say, no, that's not the vessel that we're interested in.
On that vessel, during the discussions that we had at the state, if you go out to drill a well and they have a 55-gallon barrel of diesel sitting there, just ask them to move it while you're drilling the well. They move back after you're gone. But it can't be there while you're drilling. So that's
Well, thank you all. This looks like a really good turnout this year. Appreciate it. Thank you.